Tonight on ABC News Live Prime, states of emergency as an unforgiving winter storm sweeps its way across the East Coast. More than 100 million people under alert, bracing for blizzards, dangerous ice, and damaging winds, gusting up to 65 miles per hour. Plus an ice storm warning making travel for your New Year's plans especially treacherous. Our Ginger Z is tracking it all. High-stakes talks at Mar-a-Lago as President Trump met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu amid new threats from Iran. All of this 24 hours after President Trump met with Ukrainian President Zelensky in hopes of working out a peace deal. Vladimir Putin now accusing Ukraine of launching a drone attack on one of his state residences. New details in the harrowing helicopter collision that claimed the lives of 2 pilots. In 3 days, the minimum wage will go up in 19 states, where workers can expect the bump and just how much it will help their wallets. Further proof she's irreplaceable. The new milestone for Beyonce, the 5th musician ever to do it.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Linsey Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrew Dimbert in for Linsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin with a state of emergency triggered by a punishing winter storm making its way across the east. More than 100 million people are now under high wind alerts from Indiana to the East Coast. On tap, blizzard conditions, a dangerous ice storm, and winds gusting up to 65 miles per hour, stretching from Minnesota to New York to Maine. Drivers here facing whiteout conditions and zero visibility in New Buffalo, Michigan. And driving on the highways treacherous with at least 30 cars piling up on I-75 in Detroit. Huge waves from Lake Erie crashed onto the shore in Hamburg, New York, and up to 2 feet of lake effect snow is possible there this week. Hundreds of flights were canceled today and thousands delayed. Chief Meteorologist Ginger Z is standing by with the forecast for New Year's Eve. But first, Faith Abube leads us off with the images coming in.
Tonight, punishing winds and blinding snow shutting down interstates, extreme weather of all kinds from a powerful system sweeping the country.
We are at the I-75 50-car pileup.
On Interstate 75 in Detroit, snow squalls causing a massive pileup. Authorities say at least 30 vehicles involved and multiple injuries, but no deaths.
Very slippery and someone hit me.
Iowa State Patrol reporting at least 1 fatality overnight. Lieutenant Jeremy Schaefer posting this video of a 14-car pileup that shut down Interstate 35 all the way to the Minnesota border. Minneapolis declaring a snow emergency. The incredible winds gusting over 50 miles an hour, churning the Great Lakes, waves crashing ashore along Lake Michigan. And on Lake Erie in Hamburg, New York, these vehicles forced to back away from the seawall. On the warm side of the system, thunderstorms that lit up transformers in Bloomington, Indiana, and spawned multiple confirmed tornadoes. In Pontiac, Illinois, south of Chicago, Candace White's house smashed right after she dropped off her son at band practice.
It's just a wall of gray, and I run back to the bathroom, and I'm like, I should probably be taking cover. There wasn't any alerts, nothing was going on, and then there was just a big boom. Dense fog shrouding the Northeast and New York City, near zero visibility, adding to the misery at airports. Hundreds more flights canceled today after thousands were scrapped over the holiday. In the waterlogged West, tonight authorities are investigating whether a massive pipeline leak that shut down Interstate 5 over the weekend was caused by shifting ground from days of rain that have plagued the region. And Andrew, here in New York City, temperatures are plummeting with winds gusting up to 50 miles per hour. Dangerous conditions expected in the Northeast tonight and tomorrow morning. Andrew.
All right, Faith, thank you. Let's get right to ABC's chief meteorologist, Ginger Z. And Ginger, multiple weather threats picking up tonight?
Yes, wind is going to be the most widespread one. We've already seen gusts in Cleveland down to Pittsburgh of up to 60 miles per hour. It's breezy now, but it's going to get really windy here tonight around New York into tomorrow morning. So let's go ahead and talk about all the threats, because when you mix that with lake effect snow, that wind, it is going to be impossible on the roads. And you see how many of those streamers are coming off all of the lakes at this moment. On the backside of this low, it's all about that big wind, though. So you've got wind advisories. Anybody that's covered in brown from Maine down through Boston Boston there, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, even into Appalachia. Through tomorrow morning, you're going to have high wind warnings. That's for gusts up to 65 miles per hour. So that can do damage. It can take down trees and power lines. The gusts are going to be throughout tomorrow morning. You see we stopped the clock there. That's what you're looking at, the wind gusts at 11 a.m. Close to 30 still in Baltimore, 36 Williamsport, 30 New York City. Watch for some air impacts too. If you've got travel tomorrow, just check ahead because this can slow things down at airports, if not, make delays and cancellations. And then we're going to just stick with the lake effect snow. Behind this system, enough of that wind sticks from west or northwest down to the southeast, and you end up with a foot to 2 feet. It's going to be tough to travel on I-90 between Erie and Buffalo, and the visibility will be tough too between Syracuse and Watertown. Both spots could see upwards of 1 to 2 feet by the end of the week. And a quick look at New Year's Eve. That forecast, Andrew, looking like mid-20s as the ball drops in Times Square. You could see a few flurries even mixing in with some of the confetti. You want warmth, you have to go a little farther south and west, and then the wet pattern returns for the West Coast. Andrew?
Ginger, thank you. Now to today's high-stakes foreign policy meeting at Mar-a-Lago, the second in as many days. President Trump welcomed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the two leaders hoping to focus on phase 2 of the ceasefire agreement in Gaza and a new threat from Iran. The president was also pressed about his comments suggesting the U.S. took out a, quote, big facility in Venezuela. Senior White House correspondent Selena Wang reports from West Palm Beach.
Tonight, standing with Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Trump vowing the rebuilding of Gaza will begin as quickly as we can, but only if Hamas disarms.
They're going to be given a very short period of time to disarm, but if they don't disarm, as they agreed to do, they agreed to it, and then they'll be held to pay for them, and we don't want that.
Israel says it won't withdraw more troops from Gaza until Hamas disarms. Trump pushing back when asked if Netanyahu is stalling.
Israel's lived up to the plan 100%.
The president also amping up his threats to Iran just months after the U.S. bombed 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. Iran's president now saying the country is in a full-scale war with the U.S., Israel, and Europe. Trump today warning the Iranians not to rebuild their nuclear program.
Now I hear that Iran is trying to build up again, and if they are, we're going to have to knock them down. We'll knock them down. We'll knock the hell out of them, but hopefully that's not happening.
Selena joins us now from West Palm Beach. And Selena, the president is making news on another front tonight, saying the U.S. has attacked a facility in Venezuela.
Well, Andrew, this appears to be the first time that the U.S. has carried out a land strike inside Venezuela after launching dozens of deadly strikes on alleged drug boats. But President Trump is giving few details on this, only to say there was a major explosion in the dock area where they load the boats up with drugs. But Andrew, the president refused to say whether the military or the CIA were involved in this operation.
Selena Wang, thank you. And just in, Secretary Pete Hegseth says another deadly strike on a vessel was conducted in the Eastern Pacific, the 30th strike of its kind at sea. Hegseth says the vessel was moving along a known narco-trafficking route. 2 people were killed. And protesters are taking to the streets in cities across Iran. Demonstrations are fueled by growing frustration with high inflation and the collapse of the nation's currency. It comes as the embattled regime has been cracking down on dissidents and arresting key opponents. Late today, the Iranian president said he will hear the, quote, legitimate demand of protesters. For more now, we are joined by Daniel Kurtzer, former ambassador to Egypt and Israel, who is now a professor at Princeton. Ambassador Kurtzer, thanks so much for joining us. The president and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met today at Mar-a-Lago to discuss the next phase of the Gaza ceasefire. What kind of upper hand, if any, does the U.S. have to get Israel and Hamas to agree to enter this next phase of the ceasefire deal?
Well, Andrew, other than the threat made by the president that Hamas would have hell to pay if they don't disarm, there seems to be very little of substance that emerged from this meeting that would take us to phase 2 of the Gaza plan. In that phase, there's supposed to be an international stabilization force whose mandate would be to train Palestinian police and to disarm Hamas. And there's also supposed to be a technocratic government composed of Palestinians. There's no indication, at least from what we know that transpired today, that any progress was made on those two critical issues necessary to get to phase 2 of the Gaza plan.
Trump and Netanyahu discussed potential Turkish troop deployment to Gaza. Turkey and Israel currently have very strained relations. So what would it take to get Turkish boots in Gaza? And what would that even mean for Israel and the region at large?
Well, right now, Israel is trying to exercise a veto over several elements of Phase 2, one of which is the composition of the International Stabilization Force. President Trump said today that he enjoys a very good relationship with President Erdogan of Turkey, and that suggested that Turkey might be given a role. We know that Turkey is already beginning training for engineering and other components that might be available to be used in the international force. But the question, which I'm sure is going to be discussed behind closed doors, is whether Israel will try to veto Turkish participation. The other issue, besides the international force, is the question of Palestinian Authority participation. Prime Minister Netanyahu and his coalition want nothing to do with the Palestinian Authority, and yet it's hard to see a Palestinian technocratic government emerging, even if it has the support of the so-called Peace Board that President Trump chairs, without the participation of the Palestinian Authority. So I hope they're doing some hard work behind closed doors, which is not yet indicated in their public statements.
And let's turn now to Iran. The president there announced that the country was in a full-scale war with Europe, Israel, and the U.S. Trump today saying that the U.S. would eradicate Iran's nuclear program if they were to rebuild it. Is Iran still a major threat to the region and the U.S., or are they trying to distract from the protests currently happening in their own country?
Well, the so-called 12-day war back in June, in which Israel and the United States did a tremendous amount of damage to Iran's nuclear infrastructure and to its missile supply, it really has not been rebuilt. And therefore, what you're hearing from the Iranian president is a little bit of bluster. They have very significant internal problems. They've had a drought and a water shortage. Parts of Tehran, the capital, have been without water for many hours during the day. And as you saw in your report, there has been demonstrations both in Tehran and other cities. So the Iranian president is a little bit besieged now. And I think the rhetoric coming out of the Trump-Netanyahu meeting is not going to help him at all. He's got to maintain a very strong front in order to project power. But he doesn't have a lot of power internally right now. And therefore, Iran is in a very, very weakened position relative to both Israel and the United States.
Ambassador Daniel Kurtzer, thanks so much for your time. On the heels of President Trump's meeting with President Zelensky about ending the war in Ukraine, Vladimir Putin called President Trump today, accusing Ukraine of launching a drone attack on one of his state residences. Zelensky dismissed the claims as a complete fabrication, but President Trump says his call with Putin was productive. Here's Chief International Correspondent James Longman.
President Trump may be impatient for peace in Ukraine, but tonight Russia seems to have other plans. The Kremlin claims that after yesterday's talks in Florida between President Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine launched a drone attack on one of Vladimir Putin's official residences. President Trump says he spoke with Putin earlier today.
I learned about it from President Putin today. I was very angry about it.
Ukraine calls the claim typical Russian lies, calculated to undermine productive peace talks, and Moscow has provided no proof.
Don't you have U.S. intelligence services that monitor that region very closely? Is there any evidence?
Well, it came out. Well, we'll find out. I mean, you're saying maybe the attack didn't take place. It's possible too, I guess. But President Putin told me this morning it did.
And so far, Russian attacks on Ukraine have shown no signs of slowing down. But yesterday, President Trump struck a positive tone about a deal.
We could be very close. There are one or two very thorny issues, very tough issues, but I think we're doing very well. We made a lot of progress today.
Zelensky says the U.S. has now agreed to 15 years of security guarantees.
20-point peace plan, 90% agreed, and U.S.-Ukraine security guarantees, 100% agreed.
But the main sticking point remains the eastern Donbass, which Putin wants to seize in its entirety.
Mr. President, have you agreed on the so-called free trade zone on Donbass?
The word agreed is too strong. I would say not agreed, but we're getting closer to an agreement on that, and that's a big issue.
James Longman joins us now. And James, what's the likelihood of Ukraine having launched that attack, and what does it mean for peace?
Well, Andrew, you have to ask yourself logically, why would Volodymyr Zelensky order an attack like that, just having had productive conversations with Donald Trump about ending the war? That is precisely what Volodymyr Zelensky has said. I mean, why would he scupper his own plans for peace? And look, from Vladimir Putin's point of view, it very much this is part of the Russian playbook. Claim and counterclaim. Just get in Donald Trump's ear, cause him to doubt what he's hearing. And look, the question I think of the day was made by that poll reporter who asked, surely US intelligence agencies are able to ascertain pretty easily whether or not this attack on that Putin residence actually took place. But cast your minds back to the first term of Donald Trump and his first presidency, when there were questions about Russian interference in the election at that time. US intelligence agencies told him that Russia had interfered, but he said, yeah, but Vladimir Putin said that they didn't. So Vladimir Putin knows that, Moscow knows that, they're playing a very long game here. It is all about claim, counterclaim, the fog of war, and as far as Russia is concerned, the longer they can keep this war going, the better. Andrew?
All right, James Longman, thank you. For more on that high-stakes meeting between President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, let's bring in former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine under President Clinton, Stephen Pifer. Ambassador, thanks for being on with us tonight. Trump met with Zelensky yesterday in Florida and said they were maybe very close to peace, but does that accusation from Putin over an attempted strike on his residence derail the process? The president is saying that the apparent attack makes him very angry.
Well, Putin is clearly trying to derail the progress that appears to be being made in conversations between Americans, Ukrainians, and Europeans. It's unfortunate that President Trump took Putin's word at face value. Look, the Russians cannot even get the story straight. Foreign Minister Lavrov said the Ukrainians launched 91 strike drones against the Putin residence near Valdai. The Russian Ministry of Defense says there were only 89 drones launched against all of Russia and only 18 against the area where the Putin residence is. And moreover, people who lived near the residence said that they heard no engagement by Russian air defense. So, it's really unfortunate, though, that President Trump believes Putin and it encourages Putin to continue to play him in the future.
Ambassador, it appears Trump and Zelensky were working off of the 20-point plan that the U.S. and Ukrainian negotiators have discussed in recent weeks. Has Russia responded positively to any of these points?
No, as the 20-point plan has been discussed by U.S. and Ukrainian negotiators and also by Europeans over the past 2 to 3 weeks, you've seen regular criticism coming out of Moscow of points in it. And this is part of the problem is, whereas those 20 points incorporate significant movement by the Ukrainian side, the Ukrainians now are prepared, I think, to make the painful decision of accepting some of their territory being under Russian control. But on the other hand, you've seen no change in Russian positions. And so you have this effort now where the United States, Ukraine, and Europe seem to be converging on a position, but the Russians are making very clear that they won't accept it.
So you touched on it a bit there. Putin still seems to believe that he can achieve his goals on the battlefield. So if Putin turns down the emerging 20-point plan, will Trump be prepared to apply pressure on Moscow to take a more compromising approach?
That's the big question, because I think you need to have an effort by the West, including by the United States, to put pressure on Moscow to persuade Putin that he cannot win on the battlefield, and the costs of trying are only going to mean greater cost for Russia. But that means intensified sanctions. It means more sophisticated weapons for Ukraine. It means perhaps even asking Congress to provide military assistance to Ukraine. Those things would send a strong message. But over the past year, we've seen that President Trump seems to be reluctant to put pressure on Moscow. In October, they sanctioned Rosneft and Lukoil, the two largest Russian oil producers, but then they softened those sanctions. So until there's a really strong message that the United States and West are going to pressure Moscow, it's hard to see why Putin would consider changing his position.
Ambassador Pifer, thank you. Now to the deadly mid-air helicopter collision. Both pilots involved in the crash on Sunday have died. An investigation into the crash in southern New Jersey is underway, with some witnesses suggesting the helicopters may have been flying too close to each other. ABC's Rhiannon Alley has the latest.
Tonight, the FAA and NTSB investigating a deadly mid-air collision between two helicopters southeast of Philadelphia. Each aircraft had just taken off from the Hamilton Municipal Airport in New Jersey late Sunday morning. Diana Clough saw it happen.
I say to myself, my God, I hope they're just flying too close. I hope they don't clip each other. And the minute I said it to myself, the impact occurred.
A witness capturing one of the aircraft falling from the sky. One of the helicopters erupting in flames. People living nearby racing to the scene to help. Caitlin Collins comforting one of the pilots until first responders arrived.
We could see there was a man in there. He was conscious and breathing. And the only thing I could think to do was just hold his hand and talk to him.
Tragically, that man, 65-year-old Kenneth Kirsch, as well as the other pilot, 71-year-old Michael Greenberg, did not survive. The pair had just eaten at Sal Filipino's restaurant.
It's a little bit of disbelief. It's is that really happening? They were just at our cafe having breakfast.
The debris field some 100 yards long. Thankfully, people on the ground were not hurt.
It could have gone a lot worse, and there could have been a lot more loss of life.
Andrew, the NTSB says they plan to remove the helicopters from the site tomorrow, and they expect to release a preliminary report about the crash in about a month. Andrew?
Rhiannon, thank you. A district court judge ordered that the transcript and audio from a previous hearing for the man accused of killing conservative commentator Charlie Kirk must be released. The court records are from a hearing held last fall over whether Tyler Robinson must be shackled during court proceedings. In today's ruling, the judge wrote that public transparency was foundational to the judicial system. Robinson's defense lawyers had wanted to limit access, saying that it could taint the jury pool. Another hearing is scheduled next month to determine if cameras will be allowed in court. Former world heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua is in stable condition after he was in a car accident that killed two other passengers in Nigeria today. The Nigerian-British boxer was traveling on an infamously dangerous road and is being treated at a local hospital. We're learning more now about what authorities say likely caused the crash. Here's our Maggie Ruley.
Hey, Andrew. Yeah, Anthony Joshua miraculously walked away from the accident with just minor injuries. Footage of the car he was in shows that the entire front of the vehicle was destroyed, with the car's doors ripped out and the roof smashed out of place. Two people with him in the car have died. Now, the highway where the crash happened is known as one of the deadliest roads in Nigeria. Local authorities say the accident occurred just before noon on Monday when the car Anthony was in, a Lexus Jeep, crashed into a stationary truck on the highway. Rescuers say they were there in just 3 minutes and were able to evacuate people inside the vehicle. Authorities also added that the primary causes of the crash were excessive speed and wrongful overtaking, which are among the leading causes of fatal road crashes on Nigerian highways. Now, Anthony Joshua is the former heavyweight world champion and a star on social media. It was just over a week ago he faced off against the influencer Jake Paul in Miami, and it was a blockbuster event on Netflix. Anthony knocked Jake out in 6 rounds, but today Jake took to X to write that there are more important things than boxing. It says he's now praying for AJ and those who lost their lives. Andrew?
Maggie, thank you. The number of flu cases continues to rise across the country, with New York State reporting over 70,000 cases at the end of last week, making it the most flu cases ever recorded in a single week since data was made reportable in 2004. The bulk of the cases are linked to the new variant, subclade K, which is a mismatch for this season's vaccine, but experts say getting your flu shot still decreases your chances of serious illness. The CDC is expected to release the latest nationwide flu numbers tomorrow. And as Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi approaches her final year in Congress, this week co-anchor Jonathan Karl sat down with the longtime lawmaker to ask her about the possibility of Democrats taking control of the House in next year's midterms. Take a look.
So if the Democrats win the House back?
No. When? Okay. When the Democrats win the House back, then we will.
So how does the next Democratic Speaker of the House deal with Donald Trump? What would be your advice? You've been there, you've done it.
Just do your own thing. Just be yourself. Hakeem Jeffries is ready. He's eloquent. He's respected by the members. He's a unifier, and he will have.
You'll have no doubt it'll be Hakeem Jeffries.
None.
And you can see more of John's interview in her historic career, an interview with Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, premiering tonight on ABC News Live Prime at 8:30 p.m. Coming up, 19 states will ring in the new year with a minimum wage increase, while many others still pay the federal minimum of $7.25 an hour. Who gets the boost? By the numbers. And doctors have long relied on body mass index, or BMI, to determine if a person is overweight or obese. Now researchers are suggesting a new metric that would nearly double the number of Americans considered obese. Plus, why safety regulators are investigating those flush door handles popularized by Tesla and the country banning them altogether. A welcome pay raise is in store for millions of workers across the country in the new year. Here's a look at where minimum wage is going up and where it's not. By the numbers. 19 states will raise their minimum wage on New Year's Day, including Missouri and Nebraska, which will cross the $15 an hour milestone labor advocates have long pushed for. In fact, for the first time, there will be more workers in states with a minimum wage of $15 an hour or more than those with the federal minimum of $7.25. And even if they aren't at the $15 milestone yet, many more states and cities are raising wages far beyond the federal rate. Ohio's minimum wage is increasing nearly 3% to $11, and Virginia is raising theirs to $12.77. The trend is set to continue in 2026. 3 more states, Florida, Alaska, Oregon, are set to increase their minimum wages later in the year. And economists say more than 8.3 million workers could benefit from the wage increases, as higher minimum wages often push employers to raise salaries for workers higher up on the income ladder. But 20 states are still at the federal $7.25 an hour rate, which hasn't changed in 17 years. Some policymakers and business owners argue that higher minimum wages are costly for businesses and lead to less job growth. Coming up, with prices on many goods going up, there's one area consumers appear to be catching a break: the good news at the pump and how long it might last. And later, we're getting a first look at what TV's favorite lovable, dysfunctional family has in store for their return, streaming in the new year. Welcome back to Prime. Here's a look at the stories making headlines right now. Millions of Americans are on alert as a powerful winter storm barrels across the U.S. Snow and ice snarling traffic, leading to this multi-car pileup on I-75 in Detroit. Minneapolis under a winter weather advisory due to the blowing snow and gusty winds whipped up massive waves on the Great Lakes. And in the Northeast, high wind alerts stretch tonight from D.C. to New York to Boston. President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met today in Florida to work towards the next phase of the ceasefire agreement in Gaza. The focus, advancing the 20-point peace plan, which is still holding despite a number of clashes between Israeli forces and Hamas. Hamas is also supposed to disarm as part of that deal, something Israel says is not close to happening. There were widespread protests across Iran today, with demonstrators confronting security forces and chanting slogans against the Islamic regime. Protests began Sunday in the capital Tehran, outside 2 major shopping malls, following a sharp decline in the value of the nation's currency. In a post on X, the Iranian Minister of Interior said it will hear demands from protesters. Gas prices fell for the 5th straight week. Gas Buddy reports the average price of a gallon of gas is now $2.75. That's down 22 cents from just a month ago. Gas Buddy says prices have remained low despite the U.S. blockade on Venezuela's oil exports, a trend that could persist into the new year. Coming up, why one of America's most popular ski resorts is closed indefinitely. And next, from L.A. rebuilding after catastrophic wildfires to the brokering of a shaky ceasefire in Gaza and the choosing of the first ever American Pope, David Muir looks back on the year that was 2025. From political crises and a new pope to wars and weather-related disasters, World News Tonight anchor David Muir has, of course, covered every major story for ABC News this year, and tonight re-examines many of them in Robert Roberts' 2-hour special, The Year 2025, streaming starting later tonight on Hulu and Disney+. Here now is David Muir.
This year in 2025, we witnessed Americans overcoming adversity and celebrating incredible triumphs.
It is like driving through hell itself down here.
Just 7 days into the new year, the deadly, catastrophic LA wildfires, the most destructive in LA history.
You can feel the heat, the smoke, and you certainly can see the flames over my shoulder here.
We traveled with CAL FIRE from the air.
You can see down below just how quickly these fires spread.
And the ground.
All this is going to be gone.
Battalion Chief Brent Pasqua.
These people who were coming down from the hills here decided to give up because the fire was encroaching?
Right. The traffic was so bad, they figured their chances were better getting out on foot and running the rest of the way out of here.
Alessandro Vigilante taking us to where his family's home once stood.
I'm sorry.
He sees it for the first time. Alessandro telling me he is grateful he has his family. They lost everything, but they had each other.
You've got your boys and you've got your wife.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we figured out the rest.
I'm glad you're here.
Thanks.
And that you're okay.
Thank you so much.
Just this month, nearly a year later now, an encouraging sign, the first homes being rebuilt since the fires. It was also last January, the mid-air collision right above the Potomac in Washington, D.C.
We are here along the banks of the Potomac, the scene of America's deadliest plane crash in nearly 24 years.
An American Airlines passenger jet and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter plunging into the frigid waters. No one survived. D.C. Fire Chief John Donnelly.
Chief, you broke the very difficult news today that there were no survivors here.
I can't imagine a worse scenario for rescue operations.
The NTSB is expected to release their full report of the crash early next year. This year, the ICE arrests and the protests that followed, the attacks on ICE agents, the political violence that stunned the nation, the sharp rise in threats against public officials. In April, the arson attack on Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's home. In May, 2 Israeli embassy employees killed in Washington, D.C. In June, the Minnesota lawmakers targeted at their homes. 4 people were shot. 2 of them did not survive. And then in September, conservative activist, husband and father Charlie Kirk shot and killed during a campus event at Utah Valley University. Tens of thousands would gather at his memorial. Americans tested this year in showing their resilience. On the 4th of July, floodwaters tearing through central Texas, hill country. Kerr County outside San Antonio, Texas. The deadliest flood in the U.S. in decades.
Everyone downstream, save your life.
Husband and wife Scott and Juliet Weldon were in their home, asleep.
Look at this here, the water line.
That's where the water, see that?
That's where the water was.
They opened their front door and were swept away in the waters, showing me how they survived this, by clinging to a tree.
You're holding the tree,
Yeah.
and he's holding you.
Yeah, he's holding me.
Scott told me he was not going to let her out of his grasp.
He wasn't going to let go.
No.
No, hell no.
35 years and counting.
The overwhelming grief in Texas, and still the hope. The man we met along the Guadalupe River, Robert Brake.
Hey, Robert. Oh, man. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're dealing with this.
No, thank you, guys.
He'd been there since the 4th of July, every day, looking for his parents, Robert and Joni Brake, who were swept away in their cabin.
You've been out every day.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We were there for the moment his wife texted him the last photo of his father.
Wow, what a great photo to have.
That's my father and that's
Yeah.
my brother. Just
Yeah. I know it's hard.
That's my father. That's my father.
Before his parents' remains were eventually found, we had asked him his message to them.
If you could say something to your dad and your mom.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being such good parents. Thank you for raising good children and instilling good values in us.
So many young lives gone. At the century-old Camp Mystic, a camp for girls, 27 campers and a counselor were killed.
Probably the most dangerous.
Coast Guard rescue swimmer Scott Ruskin saving many of the children while they asked him if the other young campers were okay.
Asking about their friends. They wanted to see if I knew anything about their friends, show me pictures, do whatever they could to try to find their friends.
Camp Mystic announcing just this month that they plan to reopen next summer with new safety measures, though some of the families asking how could they reopen so soon. This year, the eyes of the world on Israel and Gaza. The final 20 surviving Israeli hostages coming home. Reuniting with their families 2 years, 6 days after the war began. The first phase of a ceasefire, a defining moment for President Trump, helping to get both sides to this pivotal moment. tears of joy and relief. Israel releasing hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry saying more than 70,000 Palestinians have been killed in this conflict. While Israel has continued airstrikes, they said just this month they expect to move into the second phase of the ceasefire. The families, the world, hopeful. And we will never forget those two parents from Chicago who moved to Jerusalem with their young family. Rachel and Jonathan's son, Hirsch Goldberg-Polin, who had just turned 23, was celebrating his birthday at that music festival on October 7th, where young people were soon running for their lives. Hirsch was held in captivity and eventually killed by his captors.
People have looked at both of you and have wondered along the way, how are they doing it? And how are you doing?
Not well. There's no mom who does it well. I've spoken with thousands of bereaved parents around the world. The loss and the pain and the grieving, that's a universal human experience, and it is forever.
It is forever, she says. And their mission now, they tell us, is to help others find strength through their loss. And this year, we witnessed history being made. Good evening tonight from the Vatican, where Rome and the world are celebrating the first ever American Pope, Pope Leo XIV from Chicago, now leading the world's 1.4 billion Catholics. The cardinals from more than 70 countries gathering to elect a new pope after Pope Francis's death. And we met the sisters from across the U.S. who lead their congregations.
You're hoping that the next pope will follow in Francis's mold.
Absolutely. Yes. His love of the poor, his embodiment of the gospel. Yes.
The conclave lasting 24 hours and 21 minutes.
Let's go right to the live picture, the swell of applause. You can see right there would appear to be a white smoke.
The white smoke coming after the fourth ballot. They would name Cardinal Robert Prevost, the American, taking the name Pope Leo XIV. The Pope visibly moved. In the crowd, some who had gathered, now waving American flags. And as we walked the streets of Rome, we met the families who told us they are hopeful that this choice will unite people, even beyond the church.
Do you hope he has impact back home in the United States, too?
I would hope so now. I hope the United States sees this as a big plus for us and hope for that reason, to build those bridges and to bring those people back together.
You got to be hopeful. You got to believe.
Hopeful for the American Pope. Yeah.
Absolutely.
New hope in this new year ahead.
Our thanks to David Muir. Robin Roberts' 2-hour special. The year 2025 takes a look back at the most memorable moments that dominated headlines this year. It begins streaming tonight on Hulu and Disney+. Coming up, how two long-lost pen pals were reunited in a hospital delivery room after 30 years. And there's just 1 week to go in the NFL regular season. If you missed the 49ers dominating in last night's high-scoring matchup with the Bears, we've got you covered. We're hanging with Herm for a look at the highlights from the world of sports. Why one of the country's most popular ski resorts is closed indefinitely. The new health guidelines that would mean 75% of Americans are considered obese. And why Tesla-style door handles will soon be banned in China. These stories and more in tonight's rundown. It's ski season, but the slopes above the famous Colorado ski town of Telluride have been quiet since Saturday. Today, the resort announced their ski patrol is on strike, so they'll be closed indefinitely as they come up with a plan to safely reopen. Last week, the 78-member Telluride Professional Ski Patrol Association voted to strike while seeking a 3-year contract with a median wage increase of $8 an hour. A new definition of obesity could nearly double the prevalence of U.S. adults with the condition based on new research. The Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology Commission proposed new obesity criteria that includes waist-based measurements instead of just body mass index alone. They found that more than 75% of adults may meet criteria for obesity compared to 40% when using just BMI. More than 70 medical organizations around the world have endorsed the definition, but study authors stress that because the new criteria will likely raise the current obesity estimates, more research should be done before broadly adapting the definition. Those retractable door handles, made popular in the United States on Tesla cars, will soon be banned in China. China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology drafted new rules that require all vehicles weighing under 3 tons to have interior and exterior handles with a mechanical emergency release. Safety regulators in the U.S. are also investigating Tesla's flush-mounted electric door handles, following reports that they can trap passengers inside a car in an emergency, like battery power loss. The ban in China goes into effect in January of 2027. Beyoncé is officially a billionaire, according to Forbes magazine. She's just the 5th musician to join the exclusive club, including her husband Jay-Z and Taylor Swift. The singer has a number of businesses, including a hair care brand and whiskey label, but the magazine noted most of her wealth comes from an enormous catalog of chart-topping music and sold-out global tours. It's a family reunion in the new teaser for Malcolm in the Middle, Life's Still Unfair.
My life is fantastic now. All I had to do is stay away from my family.
Like in the original series, the trailer depicts Malcolm navigating life with his quirky and often difficult family. Stars Frankie Muniz, Bryan Cranston, and Jane Kaczmarek are all back in their iconic roles from the show's original run from 2000 to 2006. The new 4-episode series premieres April 10th on Hulu and Disney+. More than 30 years ago, when Megan Lewis was in 2nd grade, she was assigned to a high school pen pal. Little did Lewis know that she was writing to the person who later in life would be the OBGYN who delivered her 2 babies. Lewis made the discovery while going through old school papers, warranting a reunion between the 2 pen pals.
I have always just felt like Megan was such a special person, and we really connected.
Week 17 of the NFL regular season is almost done, even though it feels like the season just started. Only one more week to go, and playoff races are heating up, so it's time now for our weekly look into the world of sports. Hanging with Herm, with Coach Herm Edwards. Coach, thanks for joining us. Let's start with yesterday's game in Buffalo as the defending champion Eagles beat the Bills in a pretty slow-scoring game there. Surprising, too. Both teams are 11-5, though. Any concern with either team, especially offensively, after watching that game?
Well, Josh Allen needs to get healthy. He has a foot problem, and the Eagles seem to not play a full game offensively. They've done some good things defensively the last couple weeks, but you think about that game, they took an early lead in the second half. They didn't score any points. I don't think they threw the ball one time. So they got to get that fixed as they get into the playoffs. They'll probably win this week against Washington. That gets them, 12 wins. So they have a lot of experience, but this offense needs to get going. And then, obviously, Josh Allen needs to be healthy.
And there's a lot of competition in the NFC. Let's move to the thrilling game last night where we saw the 49ers defeat the Bears in a really high-scoring matchup, pretty much the opposite of that Bills-Eagles game. Can you see last night's game as potentially the NFC Championship? Was that a preview of the NFC Championship game right there?
You can. This was a game where there was 900 total yards offense. They only had 5 punts. They scored 80 points. 80. This was a game that if you went to go get a sandwich, you might have missed something because it was one most entertaining game I've seen in quite some time. No defense was asked to play last night. The defense did not play. They didn't on either team. So if you're a defensive coach, it was a nightmare to watch.
Boy, Brock Purdy looked good, too. Good and healthy. All right, now moving to tonight's game on ESPN between the Rams and Falcons. Are the Rams Super Bowl contenders even if they lose their division?
They are. I think they win tonight, obviously, but they're in the best division in football. We talked about the 49ers already. They're the hottest team in football. And the Seattle Seahawks has an outstanding defense. So this division, I do believe, representing the NFC, the team that goes to the Super Bowl will come out of this division.
And looking ahead for the final weekend of the regular season, we've got some games that are going to decide who goes to the playoffs and who goes home. Which divisional race are you watching for in Week 18?
Well, I'm going to watch the NFC South, right? It's not one a lot of people watch. It's Tampa Bay versus Carolina again. And imagine this. Somebody could win this thing with 9 wins. It's going to be an interesting game. The Bucs started out hot. But now they've only won 1 game out of 7, but they still have a chance to win the division in the NFC South. So this will be an interesting game.
All right, let's turn now to college football. The playoffs continue this week. Which game are you most excited for, and why is it my Miami Hurricanes? Why are they going to upset Ohio State?
Well, I'll give you that. Okay, we'll go with that one. But I want to see Alabama play, obviously, Indiana. Heisman Trophy winner. These guys are 13-0. Alabama's a good football team, 11-3. Mendoza, I think he's going to be the first player off the board. Think about him. He's in Indiana. He's probably going to be the first player picked, and guess where he's going? To Las Vegas, the Raiders. That'll be interesting.
Speaking of which, moving ahead to next year, what are you looking for in the draft? Who needs a QB the most besides, I guess it would be the Raiders too, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Geno Smith, but might be time.
No, they're going to draft a quarterback. The Raiders need a quarterback. When you think about the league, there's 32 starting quarterbacks, but not all of them are franchise quarterbacks. And so there's going to be at least 5 or 6 teams looking for quarterbacks. The problem is in this year's college, not many quarterbacks coming out. That's the problem.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Right now, playing for the playoffs, not for the draft. We'll think about that in the new year in the spring. Coach Herm, thank you for joining us. And you can watch tonight's game between the Rams and Falcons on ESPN tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can also check out our college football playoff games on ESPN and on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. That's our show for this hour. I'm Andrew Dimbert. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks for streaming with us.